I'm Jo Pradela. I'm the Director of Knowledge Translation and Equality Insights at the International Women's Development Agency, IWDA, and one of the co-founders and co-conveners of the Australian Feminist Foreign Policy Coalition. I usually reside on the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, which is also the capital territory of Australia, Canberra. And I grew up here in New York, if you're wondering about my accent. My job today is twofold. I'm going to very briefly tell you how this session is going to run, and then I'm going to take us into the first part of our session. So you have selected an interactive dialogue. I hope you've come with your energy at the end of a very long day. The first part of our session is going to be a panel where we set the scene on the regional context for feminist foreign policy. And so we have our lovely speakers here who you're going to hear from in a moment. And they are going to offer some provocations, some starter thoughts, some sparky ideas that are then going to lead us into the regional conversations that you all hopefully are seated around a table or in a group in a region that you'd like to have a conversation about feminist foreign policy in. And then our third part of the session will be a standard report back, where we'll hear from some of the special rapporteurs that we've placed at these tables, and hear from a number of other closing speakers to help wrap up some of the ideas that have been shared today. So that was my first job done. That's how this session runs. My second job is to ground this first session in evidence from research that was released last year by IWDA that was exploring the first decade of feminist foreign policy declarations and implementation around the world. And I do want to acknowledge that the research was completed and released before the current and rapid shifts in the geopolitical circumstances. But despite that, and the many shifts that we've seen even in the last few weeks and days, we think that the research continues to be a really important source of findings and evidence that can ground our collective thinking about where to from here. So I will share some of those key findings to open up this panel, but I also do want to just reflect while I'm holding the mic on the current context. So I think what we are experiencing in the current context presents us with a really fundamental tension. It's acting both to constrain what is deemed possible politically at this moment in time, and at the same time, it's raising the stakes on what we need from progressive and aligned actors in order to achieve the future we're all striving for. And I just also want to say, of course, the rise of authoritarianism is not new. It is all too familiar to feminist movements in many parts of the world. And so for those of us who have had the privilege of living in places where we haven't come into direct confrontation for so long, we really need to resist any urge to center ourselves or our struggles as though they are unique. Instead, we need to learn from our sisters in the majority world who've been practicing resistance for so long. You have forged the tools, you have the tools of resistance, and it's our turn to learn how to wield them with you. So in terms of feminist foreign policy for my organization, one of the starting points is to look to the 20 lessons for fighting tyranny. And the first of those lessons is do not comply in advance. Because it is the design and the desire of those who wish to subdue and sideline feminist movements that we self-censor or we abandon our cause because we believe that there are a lack of feasible avenues politically to pursue it. But doing those things, of course, would be complying in advance. And if we give up our power, we're teaching power what it can do to us. So we're doubling down on the need for feminist foreign policy now more than ever. We need to have frameworks for challenging systems of power, for thinking outside of hierarchies and binaries, for centering and standing with those who are most marginalized, excluded, and harmed by oppressive power structures that are deliberately targeting them or structurally disadvantaging them. And it's really important for us as a feminist organization and civil society organization that government leadership in this field is vital, but it is not the only expression of feminist foreign policy that matters. We need diverse actors coming together to keep talking about the potential of feminist foreign policy, and more importantly, we need diverse actors ready to exercise collective power enriched by our common focus in the spaces where we occupy power. We need to hold each other close with dignity and respect, and never let the present circumstances be treated as normal while feminism is treated as marginal. That's my reflection. And now I'm going to take us back to the research and the excellent panel that has come together today. So as I said, the research was released in late 2024 and looked at the first decade of feminist foreign policy implementation. And one of the key findings was around the major threats to the future of feminist foreign policy. And they were really twofold. On the one hand, there was the abandonment of feminist principles by minority world governments turning to far-right leadership. And on the other hand, there was the hollowing out of feminist foreign policy by governments who are failing to live up to the full transformative potential of the concept. So those were the disheartening findings. But the heartening findings, and the real reason that we're here today, was that the regionalization of feminist foreign policy, particularly in Latin America, where governments and feminist civil society are working together to determine priorities for FFP that make sense in the region, offer a pathway for a future. So of course, collaboration between governments and civil society is never perfect, but it is showing up through the findings as the strongest pathway to keep feminist approaches alive. And so that's what our panel is going to explore in brief. We recognize that there are distinct histories and geographies and cultural contexts that have enabled FFP to emerge in different regions. And so I'm going to pose the same question to all of our speakers so that we can really elevate those regional perspectives. So the question we've asked them all is, how is FFP emerging in your region? What unique features and points of accountability might it have? And what more needs to happen to contextualize it to maintain relevance in your region? So with that, I'm going to hand over the microphone to our first speaker, María Paulina Rivera Chávez from Red Mexicana de Política Exterior Feminista.
You might need to come sorry. Or you can take the podium if you would like.
Yeah, whatever. My phone to keep also.
There you go.
Just in case. Thank you very much. Hi, it's a pleasure for me to be here today. And I'm gonna talk about, I will try to talk about the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, but it's a huge region. My area of expertise is Mexico's feminist foreign policy. I'll try to address some of the trends, but of course we can discuss in deeper detail everything that I'm missing in the regional conversation. So I'm very happy to be representing the Mexican Network for Feminist Foreign Policy. It's a very recent initiative that appeared a year ago. And what we're trying to do is different organizations from civil society, academia, and just people that are interested in pursuing or understanding what a true horizontal and intersectional feminist foreign policy would look like. So that is the main goal of our network. And I'm gonna refer very briefly to some of the trends that we have been seeing in the region to answer the questions. So the 4 topics I will try to address very quickly. It's societies of care, sexual and reproductive rights, environmental protection, and the transformation of the financial global architecture, which are conversations in the framework of feminist foreign policy happening in Latin America and the Caribbean. So during the Forum Generation Equality that Mexico co-sponsored with France, during the COVID pandemic, there was this idea of creating a global alliance for care, This idea has been on the table on conversations on feminist foreign policy, and there was an adoption of the Buenos Aires Commitment, where there is a proposal to change the way we understand development, the way we understand care, and the collaboration that needs to happen to redistribute care, to have a care as a right, to being taken care of, and also, and I will talk about it, a co-responsibility. It's care has a feminine face, but not only. I will talk about it in more detail in other topics when I address intersectionality, but this is the main idea behind it. And this year in Mexico will also take place the regional conference on women in August, where the project of societies of care would be the main conversation there. When we talk about care, it's not only care about the people, but the planet. So another topic or trend that has been present in the region is talking about climate change within the framework of feminist foreign policy. Chile, apart from having a feminist foreign policy, has what it calls a turquoise foreign policy to talk about biodiversity, climate change. Colombia also has it as one of its pillars, its core pillars of feminist foreign policy. And Mexico has pushed from the government and civil society, of course, to improve the version of the Lima Work Program on gender. The region also has a very important agreement that is called the Escazú Agreement. So it is about decision-making of women, it is about representation, but most importantly, the protection for people that are on the front lines of fighting for gender justice. That's very important, and it's a very important agreement in the region. Now, none of these actions are possible or would make any sense, talking about care and the protection of the environment, if we do not address the unequal conditions of the current architecture, financial architecture in a capitalist system. This is a conversation that happened since the first World Conference of Women, which took place in Mexico in '75, and it is a conversation where the region is engaging very much. If we do not change the way that the resources in the planet are allocated, then feminist foreign policy won't be possible. And another very important topic, and we organized a parallel event in Mexico, this network, when the conference, the Ministerial Conference on Feminist Foreign Policy happened last year in Mexico, where sexual and reproductive rights were fundamental. So Joe was referring to the rise of authoritarian governments, the rise of anti-gender ideologies that have always been present, but we see them very much in a region that has many, many inequalities on the topic of gender and reproductive rights. So it is fundamental, and this has been pushed a lot in the region with the called Green Tide, La Marea Verde, to defend sexual and reproductive rights. The policing and the control of the bodies has been fundamental for authoritarian governments and forces to control bodies, not only of women. This is very important. We also have one of the most dangerous regions for transgender bodies, for example, that we need to address. So in 30 seconds, what are the issues that we have been pushing forward? And it is about thinking intersectionality not as a buzzword or something that has to be in feminist foreign policies because we are talking about the global south. It's understanding the global south not as a geographical category, but epistemological and political category. And if we address intersectionality and we take it seriously within these policies and these topics that we are discussing, we need to engage with systems of oppression that do not center the idea of women as a subset of other categories, but really look at the colonialism present still in a region, the racialization of bodies, of borders, the topic of migration that has not been addressed within the framework of feminist foreign policy by the governments in the region that have one, that it's fundamental. And alliances from civil society. We will organize a conference with other networks in the region this year to start thinking about not only how governments are understanding feminist foreign policy, but the people and lived experiences, the people and their lived experiences that are affected by this policy. So this would be the beginning of the conversation, and I'll leave it here. I'm sorry. I tried to do it.
The challenge of trying to cram a whole regional perspective into 5 minutes is very real. And yes, I apologize in advance to our speakers. I will try and hold everyone to account so that we can have our table-based conversations. Our next speaker is Counsellor Deweh E. Gray, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs from the Government of Liberia. Please make her feel very welcome.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here to represent Liberia on the African continent as we discuss ways in which we can start our own feminist foreign policy. We know that we are all in an interconnected and fast-changing world where the promotion and fulfillment of gender equality and women's rights is not only an issue of social justice at the domestic level, but an essential component in international relations and development. This nexus has catalyzed the rethinking of inclination and traditional foreign policy that arises from a growing understanding that gender issues are not peripheral in the field of international relations. I come from the background where when we speak about the concept of feminism in our countries, it has a different connotation. And until we can contextualize our ideas of where we see gender equality and social development, we'll still, as some African countries, have a long way to go in understanding the whole concept. And this is where, in my country, we're grappling with exchanging information with civil society, academia, understanding where it is that we fit, so we contextualize what it is to our own situation, the African situation. And it is against this background that Liberia has become committed to advancing gender equality, women's rights, protection, in how we roll out our foreign policy actions in the national sphere as well as internationally. Liberia first signed up to this foreign policy political declaration in 2023. And after that declaration, ours is now the time to create the awareness around the need for such a policy while adhering to the various international and instruments and commitment that Liberia has subscribed to. As a country, we have sought to learn from other countries that have developed a feminist approach to their own foreign policies with the aim of tailoring our own foreign policy based on Liberia's particular context. As a trailblazer for gender equality, our first step towards developing this type of policy was to assess where we were. Liberia has been, over the years, a trailblazer. We've had the first woman president in Africa. We've had the first woman who was president of the United Nations General Assembly. And so those pushed us to consider discussing this issue with all of us here around the table. Our assessment in Liberia and our assessment of our own foreign policy and foreign relations is this one when it comes to participation, looking at the rights of women, women inclusivity in the foreign service, and we are now doing an assessment to find out where we are. How can we go about it? So we took that discussion to a group of policymakers, civil society actors. We have a young, growing, upcoming Liberia Feminist Forum who we intend to use to help guide our process in developing a policy for Liberia. Then we took it to the African Union. At the African Union, the wording feminism is not used. That's what we're told. They talk about gender equality, gender inclusion, and all of that. So within the African context, we have to find out what is preferable for our situation as Africans, how we deal with the issues of social inclusion, justice for women, and also inclusion and representation in the international space. So, I think I'm 5 minutes now.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Our ultimate goal right now is to ensure that this policy not only addresses the immediate needs of women, but also contributes to long-term sustainable development. By integrating gender perspective into all aspects of our foreign policy, we hope to create a more inclusive and equitable global community. As we continue this journey, we remain steadfast in our belief that true progress can only be achieved through collective action and unwavering dedication to the principles of equality and justice. We invite all our partners and stakeholders to join us in this transformative endeavor as we work towards a future where every woman's voice is heard and valued. Thank you.
Thank you. I love that idea of starting from where you are, assessing that, and then taking the next step that leads you forward. I think there's a lesson there for everyone, conversations that can be had in civil society and with government. Our next speaker is Ms. Chandy Eng, Executive Director of Gender and Development for Cambodia. Welcome, Chandy.
Hello, I hope everyone, those who are not coming from this same region or time zone, still awake. So somehow I managed to feel energetic when I see a lot of people in the room, especially great feminists. Alright, so I'm asked to cover Asia and the Pacific, but I'm sorry, this is not my expertise. I cannot cover all Asia, and the Pacific is very big, so I'm gonna talk about Southeast Asia, the ASEAN. Those who coming from South Asia and also the Pacific can also add with what I'm missing in the topic of family foreign policy. So when talking about the word foreign policy, I remember one conversation I did with the Cambodian officer. We were talking very great with each other. We were adjusting, CSO government's agenda on the foreign policy. Then we managed to talk about Myanmar situations. And then one of the principles about non-interference coming in. And then I asked the question, how about the autopsy, like the responsibility to protect? Why we always use the word non-interference and not responsibility to protect? And then the conversation was still going on. Later, 2 minutes later, how about feminist foreign policy? Then the conversation ends. So this is not just only happening in Cambodia, even in the region in Southeast Asia. Talk with the CSO in Southeast Asia also about family foreign policy, and they said that it would end the conversation if we use the word feminist. So they asked me, is there any alternative language? So I'm asking all of you, if we are going to use the alternative language rather than feminist foreign policy, what should we use? Gender accommodated foreign policy? Gender mainstreaming responsive? I don't know. I cannot find any alternative. So that is why, to me, feminist foreign policy should be there and should focus more and should going on. So I just would like to briefly talking about Southeast Asia, ASEAN. when we talk about ASEAN, they consist of 10 countries. Now listen, is there any country in your mind, ring a bell, that will have family foreign policy in the next 10 years? Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos PDR, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. So a lot of like, not sure. Well, so more than just only about family foreign policy, and it's very hard to just pushing the word feminist inside the ideas of the ASEAN. So we are trying to push the agenda of what? When the family foreign policy is not there, what are we pushing for? Yes? Yes? Yes, that's cool. Gonna be your conversation later on after our discussions. So, women, peace and security agenda is the big things that we are pushing for, to making sure that at least some principle and the framework of family foreign policy is there. So, in this region, the 10 countries, the Philippines has the first Women, Peace and Security National Action Plan in 2014, and now they are adopting the new one in 2017. Indonesia, they also have it in 2014 and re-adopting in 2021. However, in the regions, the ASEAN, the Southeast Asia regions, we have just adopting the ASEAN regional plans of actions on women, peace and security 2022 to 2030. And in that, there are some of the principles of the family foreign policy in there. We have covered women participation in peace and security, the prevention of addressing root cause of gender-based violence and conflict, protections on the safeguarding women's rights in conflict and crisis solution, and also about the gender inclusive during the crisis and also disaster, and the last one, implementation of monitoring that answer of the accountability. So these are the things that cover in the ASEAN regional plan of actions on women, peace and security. So what we are trying right now for civil society in Southeast Asia, when I talk about I'm sorry that I do not use the word ASEAN, because ASEAN consists of 10 countries. However, there should be more than that. Stateless, Timor Leste, those who are not registered as a citizen of ASEAN. So that is why I always use the word Southeast Asia rather than ASEAN. We are trying to push for the government of Southeast Asia to adopt women, peace and security agenda in their own national action plan, so that at least some part of the family foreign policy framework is there, and intersectionality is already there. So just keep an eye looking for how family foreign policy in our action plans look like. Don't just only trust the government when they have this kind of action plan without intersectionality in there. Thank you so much.
Oh, everyone's doing amazingly on time, which is incredible because I'm not. No, thank you, Chandy. I think it's so important to unpack what we think sits underneath that label of feminist foreign policy. We don't necessarily all mean the same thing, but it's an opportunity to lift up all of the various issues that we expect from governments who are pursuing a feminist approach to foreign policy. So thank you. Our next speaker is Lina Abou-Habib. She's the director of the Asfari Institute for Civil Society and Citizenship at the American University of Beirut. Welcome, Lina.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It's lovely to be here. Thank you, Joe, and all the panelists. And I really see the act of being here, all of us talking about feminist foreign policy, as truly an act of resistance in this very, I've been coming to CSW for a long time, and I think this is one of the most complicated, difficult, challenging times during CSW. So I just want to honor all of us for being here and having this conversation. I want to react to a couple of points that Joe has said, which are really important. One of them, you said, Joe, the hollowing of feminist foreign policy. And the process of hollowing that has happened. And I want to comment on this on two accounts. First of all, this is not the first time that we see such a process of hollowing, of making an otherwise powerful instrument or powerful text and making it really vacuous. I want to recall CEDAW and the ways in which the process of having reservations of CEDAW meant that it became hollow, it became very, in certain contexts, and particularly in the MENA region, and I come from Lebanon, from the MENA region, by simply saying that our state, simply by saying that we will apply CEDAW as long as it does not contradict with local culture, customs, and religion, made it totally useless. And so I think we've seen this before, but nevertheless, as feminists in the region, we continue to hold governments, in most cases, autocratic governments, holding them accountable because they had signed on this. In the case of feminist foreign policy, there's an added complication in the MENA region, which is basically none of our government has one, except for Libya, and oh, what a joke this is. So the absence of feminist foreign policy developed and adopted by an Arab state is actually one of the major challenges. The other challenge, I think, for those of us in the MENA region, and I'm afraid in this room there are just two of us, which is again another challenge in terms of engaging with such an important global tool. One of the objective challenges, I would say, is the fact that the pioneers in terms of creating and adopting a feminist foreign policy were problematic when it came to really implementing it. And I talk here about the war in Gaza, I talk here about all the conflict in the MENA region, where we really felt actually, is your feminist foreign policy only applicable in certain places and not in others? And that's a serious problem, which actually led to something really unfortunate by many advocates from the region or from the diaspora in terms of basically wanting to abandon feminist foreign policy or saying that it's not helpful, which is another challenge in itself, because it's actually holding on to the gains of feminist movements globally, and feminist foreign policies remain our most important gain so far. So you asked the question in terms of collaboration, this is where I want to spend a few minutes. We have decided in our region to basically work with countries from the South who have feminist foreign policy, and particularly Latin America, and particularly with our Latin American partners. On the one hand, we see so far an alignment in terms of what their feminist foreign policies say and how they actually act with their foreign policy, which legitimizes the tool and also brings credibility to it. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, we see it from the perspective of the MENA region as really an important compass in diplomacy relations, in how do you engage with another country, and that's a very important one. The other point that I want to focus on is being a region where conflict is constant, where active conflict, where the killing of human beings is constant, where actually rape as a weapon of war continues to happen. And I don't need to remind us of Sudan, of Syria, of Iraq, of Yemen, of Palestine, where the killing is happening as we speak. Women, peace and security on its own as a tool hasn't been incredibly effective for many ways, and this is not the space to talk about it. But I think what we're trying to work on and what we're trying to push is the ways in which feminist foreign policy and women, peace and security can be used together, can come together. we have experimented with each. We have looked at women, peace and security on its own and how it's, dislocated and pulled apart. It hasn't been useful. It hasn't served the purpose. Is it important? Yes, it is still incredibly important for many different ways. Is it? Would it lend itself to improvement? Yes, if we can bring it together with women, peace and security. And the last point I want to talk about is, and I'm not going to talk about it much because Paulina talked about it, is actually in bringing in the perspective of care, which is so important in the MENA region. So thank you so much, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. I think that point that you made about the problematic nature of the rhetoric to action gap comes through really strongly in the research. And spaces like this where, for a long time, obviously, Sweden was out there pursuing and advocating for feminist foreign policy, which had its own problematic nature. So having more governments from the South with declared policies opens up really new opportunities. Our last speaker is Marie Soulié, head of FFP and Education Department at the Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs, and from the government of France. Marie, please join us.
Thank you so much. I'm really delighted to be here with you as we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of Beijing Declaration. 30 years ago, the concept of feminist foreign policy did not exist. And today, in 2025, among around 15 countries share this engagement. And I think we can celebrate that, the progress that we have made all along the path. Each country has its own definition, and it's good like that. As you said, Minister, each country has to contextualize that own definition of the feminist foreign policy. I'm particularly delighted to be with you because we have just launched our new strategy for feminist foreign policy in France. And I can tell you that it has been a long journey. And as you can imagine, too many battles. And it's 1.5 years working on the document, consulting more than 200 organizations in an inclusive process that we have never done before. So we are so tired, but also full of energy and happy to deliver for the 5 years to come, and especially at the time where women's rights are at risk. Having a feminist foreign policy and say loud and clear, it's a first step and give hope. In this strategy, to try to answer to the 4 questions that we prepared, the key focus of our strategy is really to put gender equality and women's rights at the heart of our external policy. Not only in our development aid, but go further and integrated gender in all our action in security and defense, trade, culture, climate change, health. Of course, it's not already done, but we are in process, and only the fact that this is our goal, it's a success. In this strategy, we reaffirming our fundamental priorities, such as sexual and reproductive health and rights, especially 1 year after the constitutionalization of abortion rights in France. But we take this opportunity to try to respond to new challenges, new or contemporary challenges, crisis and conflicts, climate change, but also digital and artificial intelligence, AI. Another key pillar of our strategy is make support for feminist organization a key priority. Because as we said, we cannot have a feminist foreign policy without working with people on the ground that are change players. But also implementing our feminist foreign policy requires working differently. And you can imagine that for an institution like Ministry for Foreign Affairs, develop and adopt a feminist approach is a challenge. But we succeed in center our feminist methodology in 4 guiding principles: a cross-cutting nature of action, partnership and coalition, working with feminist organizations, training and expertise, and accountability. In terms of key action that feminist foreign policy permits, we have a feminist foreign policy since 2019, but we haven't until now defined our feminist foreign policy. But I just want to say that feminist foreign policy is not a slogan, but really a program of action. And for us, for France, over the past 5 years, it helped us to deliver, also internally to tackle resistance, even internally saying, okay, we have a feminist foreign policy, we have a plan of action. Each department, each directorate, each embassy on the ground, each agency that we are supporting, like the French Development Bank, has to implement feminist foreign policy in our areas. So I really want to say that is concrete, as Lina said, it can be really concrete. And just some example that what feminist foreign policy helped us to do. We host with Mexico the Generation Equality Forum, and we mobilized 40 billion in commitments. We created our first fund for feminist organization, funding more than 1,400 organizations in 75 countries for 245 million. It's not question of be proud or number competition, not at all. It's not my purpose. My purpose is say that it works, and having a feminist foreign policy also help in having strong commitment and strong engagement. Just quickly on areas for greater collaboration in Europe. Yes, we committed in this strategy to work better within the EU as a space for greater collaboration within EU and in its external action. We need to go further in Europe on that point. A last thing that I want to do is that we will host the 4th Feminist Foreign Policy Conference in 2025 after Mexico in Paris. I'm sorry, I cannot say the date. I know you are all expecting as me. But for sure you will be the first aware when so for sure in 2025 by the end of the year. And that I can say on the main objective of this conference is that we really want to structure this network of countries with feminist foreign policy. But not only them, but also alliance countries and like-minded countries, to make more effective our international network of feminist foreign policy. We think that we go further and really be more influenced in the multilateral fora with these feminist foreign policy networks and allies. And sorry, just to finish, we will bring together the feminist ecosystem, international organization, government, civil society, private sector, philanthropy, as we did for elaborate our new strategy. And of course, feminist organization and civil society will be closely involved in this preparation process, because we have now feminist methodology to put in place. Thank you.
Thank you.